I'm Katie Brown, and I am the Rising Students Intern.
And I'm Kelly Phillips.
And we're here talking to you today about the spiritual discipline of silence and solitude, or as we like to call it, slowing, which is really hard in this world that we live in that is constantly busy and things are coming at us all the time. But really, silence and solitude is a discipline that's really a gift for us from God. That it's not something that is kind of a drag to do or something you have to force yourself to do, which although sometimes it is, because that's the discipline piece of it. But that when you actually put it into practice, you'll discover that it's really something that God has put in place for our benefit.
Definitely. So I have a couple of verses that I want to share with you. The first one is from Matthew chapter 4, verse 13. It says, when Jesus heard it, he departed from there by boat to a deserted place by himself. And then in Mark chapter 1, verse 35, it says, now in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place. And then in Mark chapter 6, verse 31, it says, and he, being Jesus, said to them, come aside by yourself to a deserted place and rest a while, for there are many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. And I think for us, like talking about the busyness piece, and our schedule and our life and the way that we're always doing something, we are constantly coming and going, and we're not taking the time to discipline ourselves to get that spiritual food that we're longing for, that our soul really needs. But I find that I didn't know I needed it until I actually practiced this a little bit more in my life. So finding small moments.
What?
Sometimes we look for small moments throughout the day to like while we're super busy. So Katie's going to share a moment for her in her life when she was super busy and found some time to do this anyways. So
Yeah, I definitely agree that this is a discipline that is the hardest to practice, but most necessary when your life is the busiest and the craziest. So for me, not having much life yet, not having kids like Kelly, that was when I was working at a Christian summer camp, which would go for 9 straight weeks of the summer with 13 to 18-year-old girls. Usually we were in charge of 200 or so campers every week. And so that was a period of my life for 2 summers that it was always the craziest. There's always something going on. There was always a crisis. There was always some option for me to not be by myself because you're constantly surrounded by people. So for me, it was this real concerted effort that I had to get out by myself for a little while. And I had to get away from people. I had to get away from the noise. I had to get into nature and just spend that time enjoying God's presence without agenda, which is something that I don't think we often do as Christians very easily, because we think we're supposed to be praying, we're supposed to be reading the Bible, we're supposed to be doing something, or it's wasted time. It's something we're conditioned to believe. But really, just having that rest and that space just to be with God and enjoy his goodness is all that's really needed sometimes.
Yeah. I could really relate to the whole chaos piece. I kind of feel like as a mom, for those of you that don't know me, I have a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old. And so as a mom, I feel like my entire life is pretty much chaos. Like that's all I do is things for other people. And when I get a moment to myself, it's like someone interrupts. And so the thing that I find the best is that I've actually had to take the time to train my kids in this discipline, because they won't honor my time alone and my opportunity to pull myself away to kind of recharge and get that centeredness back inside myself if I'm not teaching them to respect that time. And so they know that if I go for quiet time in my room and I shut the door, that they're not to bother me unless someone is dying and or bleeding. And then they also know, like in the mornings, I have a kneeling bench, and so I'll sit there and read my devotionals or my meditations and take time to pray and just kind of, I like to take a moment to be silent and just kind of rest with God before I get into my prayer. And so if they come downstairs and start to talk to me, they see me on the stool, they know, don't bother mom right now. Or sometimes I'll just throw up a hand like, y'all need to find something else to do. And so it is, I do find like in the midst of the busyness, those 5-minute moments that I can pull away and just be silent, be by myself, take some deep breaths and just rest in God are the most recharging. Now, on the other hand, when I first started doing this, it was really hard to be alone. Like it was hard to be silent in my car and not even have the radio on or talking to someone on the phone in my car. I mean, it was very uncomfortable and very awkward. I mean, we live in a culture where we're constantly bombarded with things. And when we do find a minute to be alone, I mean, like we check our email on our phone or pull up Facebook or Snapchat or whatever it is that can take us away from that moment. And so it can be really uncomfortable when you first start doing this. You know, when I first started doing it, it was very, very uncomfortable, and I was not used to spending any time alone. Okay, so there is a slight difference between silence and solitude. They can be practiced together, but they can also be practiced individually.
So for me, working on Rising staff, I decided to designate Fridays as my rest day. I even write it in my planner as that,
Nice.
where I kind of just take some time to go off on a mini day trip adventure by myself. Usually involves being in nature, being by water. I like going up to Lake Lanier a lot. And just spending that time doing different things. So there's prayer, there's reading the Bible, there's eating a brisket sandwich that I really like. It's just spending that time with me and God and just peace and quiet, where there's not a ton of traffic noise, there's not a lot of music playing or people talking, but just being able to really carve out that space has been so needed, because when you're working in ministry, there's always things that are competing for your time. There's always people trying to get a hold of you. But for me, it's really been crucial to carve out that space.
Yeah, I do believe like I have to take the intention to do it. So I think that's the discipline part, is the fact that I have to make the time and then honor that I've put that time in there, because there are often things like other things that I could be doing during that time that I've carved out. And I have to remind myself that there's really nothing that I could do that's more important than taking the time to rest with God, that I become much more efficient if I do take the time to rest. Silence for me is not necessarily the art of being completely silent or being in a place that's completely silent. Sometimes silence for me is more like I really enjoy going to the grocery store by myself. Like, I enjoy that I can just go and be at the grocery store and I can take my time and I don't have to talk to anyone. And for me, it is an opportunity to practice silence in a world where there's constant noise, okay? I mean, I think it's unrealistic to think that my house is going to be completely silent for me to be able to practice silence, you know? I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I like the idea of being able to like practice silence even in the moments where it's loud, right? So I think that I did kind of touch on some of the benefits that I get from doing this gift, discipline, whatever you want to call it. It is a gift. To me, it's more of a gift than I ever realized it was going to be. So some of the benefits that I get is that I get the opportunity to respond as opposed to just react to stuff. So when my kid comes home from school and he's like, "Oh, I left my homework at school," what I want to say is, "Really? What were you thinking?" You know, and instead I take that moment and I'm like, "Okay, put your shoes on. Let's go to the school and get your homework." I mean, really, I live right next to the school. It's not really that much of an inconvenience. And so in the grand scheme of things, you know, it allows me to be more patient with other people. I can practice being more kind. And sometimes a big thing for me that has really been fruitful lately is the opportunity to just not say anything at all. So I tend to share or maybe overshare sometimes. And so the opportunity for me to just not add my 2 cents to something and to just listen to someone else that needs to share has been really fruitful in my life recently. Do you have any benefits that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, it is a gift, like we've been saying this whole time. And I think that our lives go by so fast. Like, if we fill our stuff with so much distractions and there's so many things that we can be doing, life just passes us by. In this act of slowing and allowing yourself to be fully present in a moment allows you to really enjoy the life that you have. Because otherwise, our lives can just trickle by, years go by, months go by, and you're like, how did I get here? How did this happen so fast? I mean, January's already almost over. Here we are sitting. But when you make this a part of your life, when you make this discipline a priority, it allows you to enjoy the gift of life that God has given you. And he wants you to have that pace. He said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest." This is what he so desires for us to have. And it's really up to us if we're going to take that gift or we're going to put it into practice or we're going to make it a discipline where we're training ourselves to do it more and more and more, like we're talking about in this whole series, or we're just going to say, I don't need it, I reject it. And we're really the ones missing out if we decide to do that.
I totally agree. Couldn't have said it better myself. With that, we're going to leave you guys this week. We hope that you have a great discussion with your groves, and we hope that y'all have good experiences practicing this discipline like we've had.